What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 8 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. I'm your host, Zach Malat. Excited again to be joined by Josh Malat. Josh, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks for having me on again. We got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a busy couple weeks, but please subscribe below and follow all of our social accounts. Let's start in yesterday's baseball, though, Josh. And we got to start with the New York Mets, who are feeling real good right now with a now 2-1 series lead over their division rival, Philadelphia Phillies. A 7-2 win yesterday. And I think the place to start, Josh, is with Sean Manaea, who, I mean, a couple of years ago had a playoff game against Philadelphia that was actually talked about on the broadcast yesterday, where he just absolutely bombed it and completely. Then the Phillies ended up going to the World Series in the end. His team went home and he had to really change his pitching around, and he ended up doing that. And sure enough, a couple years later, Josh, 7 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 3 hits, 6 Ks, and 2 walks in the end on 91 pitches. What a performance by Manaea. I almost said shutout, but he did end up that run in the 8th inning was charged to him in the end. But overall, still 7 innings strong. Like, what a performance by Manaea.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance by Manaea. He really did go 7 shutout innings. Then the 1 run in the 8th was the inherited runner on the infield hit that he gave. But he really went 7 shutout innings. But regardless, 1 run, no runs. It was just a magnificent outing by Sean Manaea. You mentioned his story. Just a great bounce back, a great comeback story, a great redemption story, a bad performance against Philadelphia in the playoffs that he had to sit on and live through the last couple of years, gets his chance at redemption, and now he puts the Mets in prime position at home today with a chance just like that to clinch a spot in the National League Championship Series. And is there a team feeling more confident right now, riding higher than the New York Mets, playing as good a baseball as the Mets are playing right now? I mean, this team is red hot. They're clicking on all cylinders. They're having fun doing it. I mean, this team just looks magical right now, but it was just an incredible performance by Sean Manaea. And then the other thing that just gut punched the Phillies and won the Mets the game was their ability to extend, keep the pressure on, and clutch 2-out hitting. I mean, Starling Marte with a clutch 2-out, 2-run single, Jose Iglesias with a clutch 2-out, 2-run single. I mean, those 2-out back-breaking RBI hits will really just destroy a team. I mean, this was a game that was a 2-0 game in the 6th inning. It was really close. Even, it was a 2-0 game just in game 2. The Mets were up 3-0, and the Phillies with a couple of homers were able to get right back into it, tie the game, and then eventually they ended up walking game 2 off. But in a 2-0 game in the 6th inning, and with Aaron Nola pitching pretty well, you felt like even though the Mets were winning and in control the whole game, the Phillies were still a bloop and a blast away from tying the game and getting right back into it. But the Mets' ability to extend and come up with a couple of clutch 2-out, couple RBI base knocks in big spots to really break the Phillies back and extend the lead and put the game out of reach really is what won the Mets the game. And they're able to take this one 7-2, and it ends up being a really comfortable game in the end. But their ability to extend the lead really helps the Mets. And this is a team that obviously has played so many games recently. They played 9 games in the previous week, obviously with the doubleheader, the wild card series, all the travel. I mean, this is a Mets game that hadn't been at home in almost 2 weeks. So the ability to extend the lead, make the lead comfortable enough where you didn't have to use your best bullpen guys. You could save Edwin Diaz for a day. And now he's fully rested for a potential clinch game today. Overall, huge win for the Mets. And now they have a big opportunity to clinch this thing at home later this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what the Mets have been able to do. And I mean, I said it a couple weeks ago when the Mets got into the playoffs. It just seemed like a team that nobody wanted to get in front of. There's a train, watch out. Like they are speeding right now, and they are zooming through a Phillies team that, I mean, we talked about all year as a World Series contender, one of the top teams in baseball, obviously the 2 seed in the National League. And right now, I mean, this just does not look like the Phillies team that we were talking about. I think the only game where you truly said, all right, well, the Phillies are feeling real good was not even game 2, because I feel like in the end, they came back in that game. It was actually like game one. It started off strong. They had Schwarber with the leadoff home run, and Wheeler was dealing. And obviously, they lost it with the Mets rally in the eighth. But I feel like the rest of the series, I understand that they came back and forced a 1-1 series tie heading back to New York. But the problem with the Phillies right now is, I mean, their hitters have been mediocre. Although Harper and Castellanos have really solid averages right now, I feel like the clutch hitting is just a little bit off. Obviously, in game two, they proved that they're still there, and those two guys are definitely still strong in the lineup. But I'm talking about guys like Kyle Schwarber, who had 2 hits in game one and has been invisible the next 2 games. Alec Boehm, who was solid all year long and helping out this lineup behind guys like Harper and Castellanos, and is batting 100 right now in the postseason. Josh, like, they are completely struggling. Real Muto does not even have a hit in this series. Like, that is real worrying stuff for the Phillies, that this lineup that a lot of people believe in, and yes, their pitching is rock solid. Their starters are, and it's easy to rely on those guys. Their hitting has not come up clutch, and I think that the credit has to go to the Mets pitching, but also, like, the Phillies got to be better. Plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, this was a Phillies team that was looked at as a World Series contender all year, but the problem with the Phillies is what made this team a big time October threat, and a team that made deep October runs each of the past 2 years was their length in their lineup, and everybody seemingly getting hot at the same time, everybody hitting, everybody being able to keep the line moving. But with guys like Schwarber struggling ever since the leadoff home run, Alec Boehm had a terrible second half and hasn't been able to hit, and he even got benched in game two, and his status for game four is questionable as to whether or not he's going to play. That's how bad Alec Boehm has been, with JT Realmuto not hitting, with all these guys that were so accustomed to hitting and being a big part of this Phillies lineup not hitting. All of a sudden, you look at the Phillies lineup and you just have to kind of wiggle your way around and get through 2, 3, 4. Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos. Other than that, everybody else in the Philly lineup is non-existent, and this lineup is looking really thin right now. Whereas Mets with the Mets lineup, you've got everybody 1 through 9. Forget 1 through 9. With the Mets lineup, you have everybody 1 through 11 or 1 through 12 contributing, because they have a couple of guys that could come off the bench and give you a big hit too. With the Mets, they have everybody contributing, given whoever's starting any given day, 1 through 9. With the Phillies, they really have 3 main threats right now, but nobody else is really hitting. So if you're the Mets, you have a lane where you just have to kind of weather the storm between Turner, Harper, Castellanos, and then you don't really have much to worry about throughout the rest of the Phillies lineup, with Boehm struggling mightily, Realmuto struggling, Schwarber struggling, Bryson Stott got that big hit in game 2, but other than that, he's been struggling throughout the second half of the year and into the playoffs as well. And then the bottom third of the Phillies lineup are guys like Edmundo Sosa, Yohan Rojas, or some combination of Sosa, Rojas, and Marsh. And those aren't really that feared of hitters. The big boys are at the top of the lineup, and then once you get through that, you kind of have a lane that you could kind of navigate through, and then you could get yourself through a couple innings. But this Phillies lineup is not as fearsome as we have seen the last 2 Octobers when they have made deep postseason runs, and that's why they're looking really vulnerable right now and on the brink of elimination out of nowhere after cruising throughout most of the regular season.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting right now, and if you're the Phillies, like, you're not going to win a game, especially against the Mets, who are continue to hit like tremendously. You're not going to win a game on the road with 5 hits. It's just not going to happen. I feel like Josh, we're talking about our Yankees. Like, you're just not going to win with 5 hits. It's not good enough. You got to rack up more. And I think that really stood out yesterday, as they weren't able to really get to Manaea, and credit to him. He had great stuff, but I mean, the pitchers had no slouch, or the Phillies, excuse me, had no slouch on the mound with their pitcher, and Aaron Nola, who pitched pretty solid, but also just let up some clutch time hits. And credit to the Mets on those, where they were just able to get to Nola, and it was a little bit more of, all right, well, first pitch, let's go after him. And sure enough, Alonso's home run on the first pitch, Winker was able to get to him, like, and then of course you mentioned the 2-out hitting for the Mets in the end, and Nola, I mean, the line doesn't look great with the 4 earned runs, but I do think he had a solid game in the end. Like, it just came down to Mets. The Mets were really good. when it came to hitting wise, and the Phillies were not.
Right. And then a huge momentum swing in the game. We mentioned the 2-out hitting and the Mets' ability to extend. A huge momentum swing in the game was when in the sixth inning, when the Phillies had just left a couple of guys on base, and then the Mets had the bases loaded and nobody out, and the Phillies got 2 outs and were one pitch away from getting out of the inning, keeping the game 2-0. Still could have been anyone's game, but Starling Marte, I believe it was, in the sixth inning, with just an absolute backbreaking 2-out, 2-run single, and that really allowed the floodgates open and allowed the Mets to breathe and feel comfortable and extend the lead. But if the Phillies are able to get one more out and change the game by getting out of a bases loaded, nobody out jam to keep the score 2-0, all of a sudden the crowd's restless. The Mets are feeling like they just missed out on a huge opportunity to extend the lead. The Phillies are feeling pumped up. The whole dynamic and the whole momentum in the game changed, and that was just an absolute huge moment in the game. The Mets' ability to come up clutch again, extend the lead, and all of a sudden the Mets were smooth sailing from there.
Yeah, and so let's bring it to tonight, Josh, where the Mets have a chance to close it out on their home field against the Phillies, and it's going to be an interesting one, and an interesting pitching matchup here as Ranger Suarez gets his first postseason appearance this year for the Phillies. He was 12-8 on the year with a 3.46 ERA and 145 strikeouts, Josh, this season. A solid year for Suarez. And he's going to go up against Jose Quintana, who we talked about last week or the week before. He pitched very well when they went to Milwaukee, and a solid 0.83 ERA in the end for Quintana. He just had a solid game. I don't remember if the Mets won or lost that game. They may have won it in the end in Milwaukee in one of those series or in one of those games, excuse me. But you look at it now, and now he's at home, front of the home crowd. The lineup's feeling good. Suarez and Quintana, thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, Quintana pitched that game 3. He got the no decision. That was the game that the Mets came back and won in the end and clinched that wild card series on the Pete Alonso big time ninth inning shot. But you look at this matchup. I mean, obviously this is quite literally a must win game for the Phillies. But I'd be willing to make the case that this is also close to a must-win game for the Mets. I mean, you have a golden opportunity right now to get to Ranger Suarez, a pitcher that, yes, in the first half of the year was looking like the best pitcher on the planet, was looking like an all-star, got off to that incredible start, but then injuries and struggling in the second half. And this is not the same pitcher that we saw in the first half, so the Mets have a big opportunity to get to Suarez. But if you're not able to take care of business at home today, obviously it's tough to say that this is a must-win game for a team rolling like the Mets, a team that came into the series as underdogs, a team that's at home right now in Game 4, up in the series 2-1, with still Game 5 to play if necessary. But I'd be willing to make the case that this is close to a must-win for Game 4, because if you cannot get the job done today, all of a sudden you have a sad, tough trip back to Philadelphia waiting, Zach Wheeler waiting for a potential winner-take-all Game 5 in Philadelphia with the crowd going nuts. So if I'm the Mets right now, I'm like, guys, we got to take care of business today. We got to get this done at Citi Field in Game 4. We do not want to go back and have to face Zach Wheeler again and have to go back and play another game in Philadelphia, because I think if the Phillies can find a way to win this game, all of a sudden all the momentum swings in the Phillies' favor at home in Game 5 with the crowd backing them. But right now, the Mets have all the momentum, and if they could take care of business in Game 4 and knock the Phillies out right now, that'd be huge for them. And also, if you could end this series in 4 games, all of a sudden, if you're the Mets, you have some days off to play with, and God knows the Mets can use some days off right now with the amount that they've been playing and the amount that they've been traveling in the hectic past week and a half that they've had. But yeah, I mean, on paper, in terms of the pitching matchup, it's a pretty even pitching matchup. Jose Quintana has been pitching really well lately. We mentioned he had that incredible start in Milwaukee that helped get the Mets to where they are now in that clinching game in the wild card series in Milwaukee. Ranger Suarez, I mean, this is a big opportunity for him with the Phillies, and they're back against the wall, going on the road to force a Game 5 and give the Phillies a big time performance and kind of erase all those second half of the season woes that he had after that incredible first half. But should be a great game today. Ranger Suarez, Jose Quintana, really looking forward to it. But a big game for the Mets and a big opportunity to get this series done and over with at home in front of your home fans at Citi Field.
Yeah, they need to close it out tonight. And I think when you look at the Phillies, a couple of the guys in the locker room even last night were saying, yeah, they don't want to go back to Philadelphia. So that's the Phillies' motivation right now, is the Mets don't want to go back to Philadelphia. You have to find a way, some way, somehow to win a game at Citi Field where I mean, the Mets have been really, really strong this year. So it should be an interesting one. Josh, is it over tonight?
Oh man, put me on the spot, Malamud.
Yeah.
Man, this is tough. You know what? I don't know if this is the baseball fan in me and wanting to see a game five, but you know what? I think the Phillies bats come alive today and they force a game five. My prediction is this series is heading back to Philadelphia. We're getting a game five.
Wow, should be interesting.
It's too good of a series for it to end now. This is such a great series between two historic rivals, two great teams, two teams playing at a high level. I don't think it could end in four. We're seeing a game five.
Yeah, well, should be interesting, and we'll see what happens there. Phillies and Mets 5:08 tonight as it's Ranger Suarez taking on Jose Quintana. Should be a good one. Game 4 of the NLDS tonight in Queens. And let's take things to the other side of New York into the Bronx, where the Yankees are not in the Bronx, they're on the road. As Game 3 of the ALDS between the New York Yankees and Kansas City Royals takes place tonight, a 7:08 start with Clark Schmidt getting the start for the New York Yankees against Seth Lugo on the mound for the Royals. And Josh, I think the big place we have to start here is Clark Schmidt coming into this game, the pitching matchup overall. Clark Schmidt, he's getting the start in this one over a guy like Luis Gil. And interesting decision for the Yankees. I'm sure it was very, very close in the end, deciding who they really wanted to go with here in a big game 3 that you would say for the Yankees that they probably need to have this one after the loss in game 2. But they're going up against Seth Lugo, who's been a very lengthy pitcher, and he could go long in games. He's been very solid this season. Obviously had a start in game 2 of the wild card against the Baltimore Orioles, which the Royals won that game in the end. But on the road, the Yankees going with Schmidt over Gil. What do you think of this overall?
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't have complained either way. I was obviously a really close call between Clark Schmidt and Gil. You can't help but feel for Gil because you feel like he had a good enough year where he kind of earned a spot starting in the division series. But really, back and forth decision here between Schmidt and Gil. You could have went either way. I actually like the call to go with Schmidt here because as great as Gil was this year and as good as his record and his numbers would indicate he was, Gil does have a tendency every now and again to kind of blow up. And if he doesn't have his stuff right away, he can let the game get away pretty quickly. And all of a sudden it becomes a blowout. Whereas Clark Schmidt has the ability to kind of grind it out. And even if he doesn't have his best stuff, he'll find a way to kind of grind it out, gut it out, keep you in the game. So I kind of trust Clark Schmidt in this spot in a tie series, going on the road in a tough environment in Kansas City. I kind of trust Clark Schmidt slightly more than I would trust Gil. Although I do feel for Gil. He won 15 games, has a good chance to win Rookie of the Year this year. You feel for the guy, and you feel like he earned the opportunity to start, and hopefully he gets that opportunity if the Yankees are fortunate enough to advance to the championship series. But in this spot, in a tightly contested game like I expect this game to be tonight, I trust a guy like Clark Schmidt to kind of gut it out, grind it out, and keep the Yankees in this game. So I actually like the call to go with Clark Schmidt here.
Yeah, definitely fair. And I agree with you. I think the thing when you look at a guy like Schmidt is a grinded out pitcher that can also give you some length. I think the Yankees need that after the other day. Yes, they get a day off, of course, in between to go to Kansas City, but they relied on their bullpen the other day with Rodon struggling with that 4th inning and allowing the 4 earned runs, and the Yankees had to go to their bullpen for the rest of the game. And I feel like right now you're looking at a guy like Schmidt who can give you some length going up against a pitcher on the other side who can also give you some length in Seth Lugo. So I think that's definitely one key point of tonight's game, having Schmidt go a little bit long and just try and grind it out. But the other point is obviously the offense, because that's been a little bit shaky, Josh. And I think you saw some positives in game 1, but then you also saw a little bit of the negatives in game 2 once the Royals, whose bullpen was not great in game 1, and the Yankees were able to get to them. All of a sudden, game 2, it felt like the Royals bullpen just had the Yankees number. And all of a sudden, they're bringing in guys left and right, lefties and righties, and they're just zooming by. And of course, the Yankees got 1 earned run against the bullpen in the end, and it came in the ninth inning with Jazz Chisholm hitting a solo shot. I think for the Yankees lineup, like you kind of can go both ways on it. Of course, you like what you've seen from a Juan Soto, even though it wasn't great the other day. Game one was really, really good. You've seen guys like Alex Verdugo on the bottom of the lineup, who's batting 429 right now in 2 games. Those are the good stuff. Then you get to the guys where, yeah, the middle of the season, you're like, all right, with some of the best hitters in baseball. And it is the question of what has to happen for the things to go right for the two guys in the middle of the lineup in Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. Like there's just something that needs to switch right now. And I know it's only 2 games and people react as Yankee fans, of course, overreact, but it needs to step up. And I think tonight is the answer. Like it has to happen in the next 2 nights, most likely tonight, to really get a sense of, is this going to really happen or not?
Yeah, obviously it's been only 2 games, but everything's extremely magnified and everything's 10, 100 times more important in the postseason, right? But the big question for the Yankees is Aaron Judge. When's this guy going to get going? We talked all season long about how it's the Soto and Judge show and how nobody else is contributing and how Judge is always getting on base for other people, but people can't drive Judge in. Now, all of a sudden, through these first 2 games, we're seeing the opposite, right? We're seeing people get on base for Judge, but Judge has been the one that hasn't been able to cash in and drive those runners in. Like he always was able to seize the opportunity in the regular season. Hasn't been happening for him in the postseason, but Judge's postseason struggles have been well documented. He actually has the highest K rate for any player with, I want to say, a minimum of 100 plate appearances in postseason history. So we've seen this before from Aaron Judge, where he'll be incredible all season long, struggle the last couple of games of the regular season, kind of takes that with him to the postseason, and then he's unable to get going in the postseason. So this is a huge game for Aaron Judge and a huge game for the Yankees. I mean, the Yankees are pretty fortunate to be in this position tied 1-1 because game one could have easily gone the other way, and the Yankees could easily be heading back to Kansas City right now down 0-2, which would have been catastrophic. But they're fortunate to be in this position tied 1-1. And maybe going on the road is exactly what the Yankees need, right? Get away from New York, get away from all the distraction of being in the big city and all the noise and all the bright lights of being in the Bronx, being at Yankee Stadium. Maybe going to Kansas City, going on the road, getting off to a hot start and being able to silence that crowd is exactly what the Yankees need. And maybe they just need a change of scenery, but there's no denying the fact that the Yankees have had their opportunities, right? They're, I want to say, 3 for 19 or 3 for 20 in the entire series with runners in scoring position. And ultimately, a championship team, when they get an opportunity, they capitalize on those opportunities. And that's not something the Yankees have been able to do through these first 2 games. But they've had nothing short of a gazillion base runners, of a gazillion ducks left in the pond on the bases. And they just haven't been able to get that big hit, that big clutch knockout punch to drive in multiple runs and really put the Royals away. So if you're the Yankees in game 3, you need to strike early and you need to strike often. And when you get an opportunity with guys on base, you need to cash in, put together quality at bats, and pass the baton to the next guy. And Lugo's going to be no easy task. And Lugo obviously dominated the Yankees in their most recent series at Yankee Stadium. But the Yankees actually were able to get to Lugo and torch Lugo when they faced him in Kansas City earlier this season. And that was a series that the Yankees took 3 out of 4 and probably should have swept had Clay Holmes not blown that final game. But the Yankees really looked good. Their offense was clicking when they visited Kansas City earlier this year in the middle of June, I want to say. And the Yankees in their series in Kansas City, that was kind of like their last stretch of being red hot before they went into that summer swoon. So hopefully going back to Kansas City can kind of return the Yankees back to those good times before they went into that huge middle of the summer slump. And but maybe going over to Kansas City, getting away from home is what the Yankees need for that change of scenery to kind of get their offense going.
Yeah, definitely fair, and it should be interesting and trying to look at this team and the positives. We're talking about a team that was 50-31 on the road versus 44-37 at home this season. So, I mean, they were better on the road and maybe getting them on the road, like you said, Josh, and going on the road away from the noise in New York that happens all day long. Like maybe this is a good sign for this team, and could it lead to some positive vibes in the locker room heading on the road and bringing this team closer to a win? But should be interesting tonight. Seth Lugo, Clark Schmidt, Game 3 ALDS. The Yankees need to have it series tied at 1-1, and we'll talk about that one on Friday. We move things from baseball to the NFL as we got some shocking news in New York sports yesterday as Coach Robert Saleh of the New York Jets was fired yesterday, and he went 3.5 years with the team, finished with a 20-36 record, no playoff appearances. And I think to start it off, Josh, I think, yeah, the time was coming. I don't know if it was exactly the right spot to do it in the middle of the season, considering this team, although they are 2-3, they are fighting this week with the Bills for first place in the division this week. So they have a huge, huge game coming up on Monday night, and we'll get to that in a bit. But I think the timing of it, plus the fact that this team right now, their problem is offense. It's not the defense. The defense has been pretty strong for the last 3 years and definitely so far this year. The problem right now is this offense. And Robert Saleh, I understand, is the head coach and he should be in charge of everything overall, but he came in as a defensive specialist, and that's kind of what the Jets a little bit expected. They more so wanted him to be a motivator and gather the locker room and be a Dan Campbell, I would say, is the example type of guy. I think when you look at the Jets right now, though, you're it's basically like overall, like if you said in pitching that or the pitching of a team has not been good, okay, let's fire the hitting coach. Like it just does not make sense from that standpoint, Josh. And I think that's a bit worrying for the Jets that they fired him in week 5. No teams really fire him in week 5. If you were so against Robert Saleh, if you were like Aaron Rodgers, if you were against like just how things were run, then they should have fired him in the offseason. And nobody would have batted an eye. They said, all right, well, Jets fans wanted him gone. Rodgers didn't think it was right. But week 5, and they're still in the division race, it doesn't make too much sense for me right now.
Right. The question is, does this help the Jets right now? And I'm not sure I could say it does because, like you said, the Jets brought in Robert Saleh knowing that he was a defensive-minded guy, was a great defensive coordinator all those years with the 49ers. He was a defensive-minded guy who was going to be a defensive-minded coach. And from that standpoint, for the last 3.5 years, he's ran a top-flight defense for the Jets. And it's been the offense that's always been the problem. And obviously, you had Zach Wilson and just a terrible quarterback situation to deal with. And now you have Aaron Rodgers, and it's still not working out. Should that all be on Saleh? No. But ultimately, you knew that you were getting a defensive-minded guy, and he delivered from that aspect in terms of being a really good defensive coach. But my question is, how does this help the Jets now? I mean, Saleh, is he the best coach? No. But it seems like the guys like playing for him. It seems like he motivated the guys. It didn't seem like he lost the locker room at all. And even through the years that the Jets weren't playing well and have been a losing team and struggled with Zach Wilson the last couple of years, he always seemed to keep the Jets competitive in games. And the Jets always seem to be competing, even if they lost at the last minute, even if their record doesn't indicate it. The Jets always seem to be a competitive football team that shows it out there on the field week in and week out the past 3.5 years with Robert Saleh. So I'm not really sure if now was the correct time to let him go. Now, you understand it from the perspective of the owner and Jets fans as a whole, because this team had high expectations. All these years you've been saying they're just the quarterback away, and then they finally got the quarterback, and it's still not working out, and you're disappointing with a 2-3 record. But you can't help but think that if Greg Zuerlein makes a makeable field goal and Aaron Rodgers hits a wide open Garrett Wilson in the London game, all of a sudden maybe we're talking about a 4-1 Jets team and a completely different narrative, and Robert Saleh still has his job. So a lot of twists, a lot of turns, a lot of questionable decisions. But ultimately, I don't think that all of the Jets' disappointments and a tough start to the year through 5 weeks should all be put on Robert Saleh. And I think that he's a scapegoat in this situation. And yeah, maybe teams needed to change. Maybe the Jets needed to change. Maybe you just need to get a new voice in there. And maybe the Jets go on a run now, because we've seen that a lot. We saw it we were talking about the Mets and the Phillies. We saw it with the Phillies a couple years ago when they fired Joe Girardi because they just needed a change of the guard, a change in voice for who the players were listening to. Rob Thompson took over, and all of a sudden the Phillies went on this incredible run all the way to the World Series. Maybe even though it's not necessarily Rob Saleh's fault for the Jets' failures and a disappointing start to this season, maybe the Jets just need something to kind of light a fire under them and just need a new voice in there. And maybe this could be something that turns the Jets around. Even if the Jets turn it around, maybe it's not even a reflection necessarily of Robert Saleh being a bad coach or all of their failures being his fault, but maybe the Jets just felt that now is the time to make a change and they could go on a run now with a new guy in charge. So from that aspect and needing to make a change and get a new voice in there and try to salvage the season and go on a run here starting with week 6, I understand it from that perspective. But are all the Jets' failures and misfortunes all on Saleh, and is it necessarily all his fault? Absolutely not. I think that he's a major a scapegoat in this situation.
Yeah, my last word on this, we go back to the London game. They lost 23-17 to the Vikings. And you look at the first 4 drives of the game: punt, pick 6, interception. The offense was not good to start the game. The decision that I think had a fair amount to do with the firing in the end, and also could really tell that like a coach didn't completely know what he was doing. Do I think Robert Saleh was a great football coach? Not really. I do think he had his flaws, and I think he was more of a defensive mind rather than a head coach that completely knew what he was doing and knew the right decisions at every point. But I think when you look at it, going 4 drives and nothing for it with 2 picks and a pick 6 in the end, then going for it on 4th down where you could put your team on the board down 10-3 rather than 10-0, and all of a sudden the Vikings go the other way and make it 17-0. I think that was a bad decision by Saleh in the end. And you look at that and say, well, Woody Johnson made the decision. Yeah, I mean, this game taking place in London, obviously Woody Johnson, the former ambassador of England, like, could that have done with it in front of his people that the Jets looked like a terrible team in the end? Maybe. But I mean, that's Woody Johnson for you. That's 25 years of this Jets franchise. So definitely interesting. Josh, I'm going to bring it into the Bills-Jets game now on Monday night. And obviously Jeff Ulbricht's going to be in charge of this Jets team now for the rest of the season. Of course, a defensive coach that is he's part of like the Niner crew that Saleh came with to New York. In the end, he's going to be in charge as the interim head coach. And they go up against a Bills team now, Josh, that has lost 2 straight. So maybe the right time to get the Bills. Of course, they're at home. But also, like, the Jets need a win here. Like, if they don't get a win, then you're really like, all right, this season might be, like, in the dumps.
I mean, you look at this game, right, and just how catastrophic the Jets start has been. But after all this and firing Saleh and the disappointing losses, if the Jets can find a way to win this game, they're in first place in the AFC East. So just like that, the Jets could be right back in the mix. Nobody's running away with this division right now. It looked for a minute there when the Bills started off 3-0 that they were going to run away with the division, but all of a sudden they're 3-2. The Jets are 2-3. I believe the Dolphins and the Patriots are 2-3 as well. And if the Jets win this game, all of a sudden they're 3-3 with a win over the Bills. They'd be in first place in the division. So a lot can be forgotten with a big time win on Monday Night Football. But this team, or this game rather, is going to show a lot about this Jets team. Are they going to respond? Is the firing of Saleh going to light a fire under this team that and get the offense going like we've been waiting? Obviously, we talked a couple weeks ago about that great game against the Patriots, and they gutted out that win against the Titans, and the offense had looked better and better. But the offense has taken a step back each of the last 2 games. Is the offense going to take a step forward? And is Aaron Rodgers going to finally get going? The good news about the last game was the connection with Garrett Wilson is appearing to get better. But at the same time, if teams know that it's coming because you're force-feeding Garrett Wilson 20-something targets, that's not going to work either. So there's kind of like a fine line between improving the connection with Garrett Wilson without being so predictable that you're going to throw him the ball every single play, and then defenses are just going to lock him up and take him out of the game. But ultimately, the Jets are going to show what they've got and how they're going to respond from this this adversity and a tough start in a big time game in a big time environment at MetLife, Monday Night Football, under the lights, prime time, national television. What is this Jets team made out of? And is the firing of Saleh going to change things? And are we going to see a difference in the way they play between how they were playing under Saleh and how they play under the interim coach, and how are things going to change? Is the offense going to finally get going? A lot of questions will be answered with this Monday Night Football game. A big one for the Jets and a big time opportunity, because if you win this game, all of a sudden a lot can be forgotten, and all of a sudden it looks like a fresh start to the season, and all of a sudden you blink and the Jets could be in first place. So this Monday night game is going to show a lot about this Jets team, and it'll really change the feeling that the fan base has between a win or a loss. A lot of things can change.
Yeah, 100%. It should be an interesting one. Monday night, the Jets taking on the Bills, 8:15 start. Tune into that one. Josh, let's move it to the other side of MetLife, though, as let's get some positivity in here. As the New York Giants are also 2-3, but feeling a lot better after last week. They absolutely stunned the Seattle Seahawks 29-20 in Seattle, and Seattle drops 2 straight now to Detroit and the Giants. And I think the big thing from this one, I'll start off with one end with Daniel Jones and how solid I've talked about Daniel Jones and just being solid each and every game. Don't do too much, don't do too little, just the sweet spot right there. And I think that's 3 games this season now, Josh, that I've really looked at Daniel Jones and said, wow, he's looked really, really good. 3 or 4 of the 5 games that I've actually looked at this Giants team said, yeah, they look really solid under Daniel Jones. This offense does. And Josh, this was without Devin Singletary and Malik Neighbors. Somehow, some way, they pull it off on the road in Seattle. What a performance from the Giants offense is definitely the place to start here.
Right. You look at the way this game should have played out, right? The Seahawks started out 3-0, had a tough loss against the Lions. They were looking like one of the best teams in the NFL. They're 3-1. The Giants are coming off a disappointing loss to the Cowboys. They're 1-3. They're not looking too good. And to top that off, they're missing Devin Singletary and they're missing Malik Neighbors, and they have to go on the road to one of the toughest places to play in Seattle. Should be an easy Seattle win, right? No Devin Singletary, no Malik Neighbors, no problem. And the Giants are able to steal a win in Seattle. Easily one of the most confusing. The Giants are one of the most confusing teams. This is one of the most mind-baffling games of the season so far. One of the most shocking results that we've seen in the season so far. But what a win for the Giants, right? The defense stepped up, made some plays. I mean, you had that catastrophic play early on with the fumble return for the touchdown by Seattle, and you thought, oh boy, here we go again. And the game was not looking good. But all of a sudden, the Giants were able to work their way back into it. I mean, Daniel Jones looked really good. There's no denying it. Obviously, everybody's going to question: is Daniel Jones the guy? Is he the guy moving forward for the Giants? Can he be that franchise quarterback? Well, he did play that part in this past game. Obviously, we need to see more consistency, and he needs to do it on a week-in, week-out basis, but he really looked good in this past game. 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, and how about, in the absence of Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy rushing for 129 yards, Darius Slayton, who, even with Malik Neighbors, had been a big-time contributor for the Giants receiving corps, but a monster game for him as well. 8 receptions, 122 yards, as well as a touchdown. I mean, what a win for the Giants, right? But at the same time, if you're the Giants, you go through this cycle, right, of a big win, they reel you back in, then they have a disappointing loss, and then you're like, okay, all right, that was a fun win. It was a mirage. Now we're going back to tanking and back to our regularly scheduled programming. But then they reel you back in with another big win against Seattle. So I'm interested to see how the Giants respond. They have a big opportunity, and we're going to get into it after this on Sunday Night Football against the Bengals. Can the Giants finally follow up a big win with another big-time performance, or is it going to be 1 step forward, 2 steps back, like we've seen way too often in the Daniel Jones era? But a really big win for the Giants in Seattle, a win that I'm sure that, including myself, I'm sure including you as well, many people did not expect to happen on the road against a really good Seattle team that I'd like to think has a really good chance at making the playoffs, and a really talented team. But ultimately, they just couldn't get anything going on offense, and a big time win for the Giants. But how are they going to respond and follow something like this up?
Yeah, quickly, just the last thing on this game, the Giants defense, because we talk each and every week of, oh, all right, well, the secondary needs work and the defensive line's really good. I mean, the defensive line looked really good in this game, of course, but also the secondary looked really solid. Like DK Metcalf, only 4 receptions. Tyler Lockett, only 4 receptions. Jackson Smith-Njigba, only 4 receptions. And the fact that they had those 4 receptions was really because that they were losing in that game. It forced Geno Smith to throw. Kenneth Walker only had 5 carries in this one. That's credit to the Giants for taking this game by the throat early and really not giving it back and forcing Geno Smith to throw the ball. And 7 sacks on the quarterback from the Giants defense. They look very, very strong. And it proves to you that the Giants are just one of those teams that if their defense is playing as they are, Daniel Jones just has to be solid enough and the Giants can win football games. Josh, I don't know the last time you saw like a special teams touchdown from the Giants. They also turned up great. Obviously, the block field goal to extend the lead and ultimately win the game. But the Giants defense overall, like I said, just be good enough, Daniel Jones. We got your back.
Right. And I don't know if people are realizing just how good Dexter Lawrence is, but week in and week out, he's continuing to prove that he's one of the best defensive players in all of football. And he really needs to be mentioned with the best defensive players in all of football. And he needs to be put out there on the national stage. Obviously, the Giants haven't been, a Super Bowl contender. They don't really get the attention that some of these other teams get, but Dexter Lawrence needs to get his name out there and be put on notice because he had 3 sacks, another monster game, and this Giants defense. I mean, you mentioned it. The secondary definitely needs work, but up front, they're just about as good as anybody with the trio of Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau. And the 3 of them collectively have been really getting to the quarterback and applying that pressure. And that's something that the Giants have struggled in past years, and they're looking way better at attempting to do that and applying pressure at the quarterback, getting to the quarterback, getting those sacks, and getting off the field this year as opposed to years past.
Yeah, and just to touch up on this, the Bengals now travel to New York. They're 1-4. The Bengals are. Giants sitting at 2-3. We have Sunday night football this week. Bengals come in as 3.5-point favorites, which I don't know if the Giants are getting enough credit here. They are at home. Yes, they are 0-2 at home this year and really dominant on the road. But now you look at this Bengals team and say, well, they're 1-4. Giants got them maybe at the right time. But, Josh, is this the disappointment week that all of a sudden the Bengals, who are struggling, come into New York and just get everything back to normal?
Right. I mean, I alluded to it before. The Giants got a big win a couple of weeks ago in Cleveland, disappointing performance, and couldn't get in the end zone on Thursday Night Football when they played Dallas. Another big win on the road against Seattle, coming back home on a nationally televised game. It's as if the schedule makers did this on purpose, right? It allow the Giants to get a big win, then they have to come home on national television to try to back that up, and they haven't been able to, they weren't able to do that the first time. Can they do that this time? Maybe they're catching the Bengals at a good time, but maybe it's also a really bad time because this is a Bengals team that is desperate for a victory. And you know that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and this electric Bengals offense is going to want to show out on the national stage at MetLife Stadium. So on Sunday Night Football. So this may be a bad time to catch the Bengals, especially with Joe Burrow coming off an incredible, although it was a loss to the Ravens in a game that they should have won, it was an incredible 5-touchdown performance by Joe Burrow that he's coming off of. So although this Bengals team has been struggling to put wins together, Joe Burrow and this offense are definitely back on track. And this is a Bengals team that doesn't that 1-4 doesn't necessarily indicate how good they should be. This is a team that could easily be 5-0. I mean, they inexplicably lost to the Patriots. A questionable call lost them the Chiefs game, blew a game against the Ravens. I mean, this is a team that just has struggled closing out games, but we've seen it from the Bengals. They went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. They've went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes in a couple of AFC championship championship games. This is a Bengals team that should be a Super Bowl contender and should be mentioned up there amongst the best NFL teams. Obviously, you had all the injuries last year. Last season was kind of a wash. But the previous 2 seasons before that, this is a Bengals team that was a bona fide Super Bowl contender and always in the mix. And I wouldn't rule out the Bengals yet because they have a tendency of starting out slow and then getting hot and hitting their stride in the middle of the season and then going on a roll, and they go into the playoffs playing at their best. So don't sleep on the Bengals. Don't let that 1-4 record fool you, and don't take this game lightly. If you're the Giants, you need to come into this game, obviously, with the same intensity that you went into the Seattle game at. But if you're the Giants, you're coming off that big win in Seattle, but now show me something. Show me that you can string something together. Show me that you can back up a really good performance with an even better performance instead of the constant one step forward, two steps back. So this is a really interesting Sunday Night Football matchup, a really interesting matchup between two of the more confusing teams in the NFL right now. A Bengals team that's uber talented and should be a Super Bowl contender, and a Giants team that we've seen flashes of, but we're still waiting for them to put it all together, and we're still waiting for consistent performance from Daniel Jones. So this is a big game for both of these teams. Both of these teams need it. The Bengals need it in the worst way to get back in the mix in the AFC, and the Giants are looking at even their record at 3-3, and all of a sudden, if they're 3-3, just like that, they're in the mix maybe for a playoff spot in the NFC. So a really compelling matchup here between two of the more interesting teams in football, and should be a really good Sunday Night Football matchup at MetLife Stadium this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And the Giants, couple of losses this year. Minnesota, Washington, and Dallas. Minnesota, Washington is your NFC Championship game right now. That's how good Washington has been. And for the Bengals, they lost to Kansas City, Washington, and Baltimore. Of course, you had the New England game, and that looks really bad on it. But like both of these teams could have really good records if they faced a different schedule than they did. But that's why they play the games. Sunday Night Football, 8:20 start. It's the Giants coming in as 3.5-point underdogs against the Cincinnati Bengals. Josh, we're going to finish things off today with one final game, and it's the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Both teams coming off of pretty bad losses on their record. Niners sitting at 2-3. I don't know if anybody would have said that in week 5. And the Seahawks sitting at 3-2. But the Niners, I think, is the big question here. They come in as 3.5-point favorites in this one, going up to Seattle on the road. And my question is, how can anybody believe in the Niners right now? I understand that when you say, all right, well, if you told me Christian McCaffrey would be out, that, yeah, maybe they would have a 2-3 record. I still think this Niners team is better than that. And it's kind of shocking to me that they are sitting at 2-3. And I am a little bit confused why they are a more than a field goal favorite on the road. Maybe it's because they've had Seattle's number over the years, and maybe some of those guys are getting healthier. Your Deebo Samuels and George Kittles of the world. But those guys played last week, and they completely blew a game to the Arizona Cardinals. So doesn't make too much sense to me, this spread. I think it should be just right even on the line. But I might be surprised. I think the Niners, obviously, in the past, have had the Seahawks number, and that's where that number comes in this year.
Yeah, obviously, this is a really good matchup here, a matchup between two division rivals, two playoff hopefuls. Obviously, the Niners view themselves as a Super Bowl contender after coming so close to winning the whole thing last year. But what's going on with the Niners? I mean, you want to say that the problem is the injuries, and obviously you've had guys in and out. George Kittle missed a game. Deebo Samuel missed a couple games. Christian McCaffrey's been out all year. That hurts. But in the past, we've seen the Niners suffer injury after injury after injury, and they've had the next man step up. They've got such a great system. They're so well coached by Kyle Shanahan, where even if they're missing somebody, it seems like the next guy could just step right in, fill the guy that's missing time's role, and then they have no problem. But the biggest problem with the Niners has just been closing games and the inability to close games. Obviously, you have the Viking game. They beat the Jets. They beat the Patriots. The Patriots game is a game that they should win. But you've got the Rams and you've got the Cardinals. Two games, two big losses, by the way, because that gives those teams a tiebreaker over them in the division. Those are two in the division losses right there. But also two games where the Niners had what looked like pretty comfortable late game fourth quarter leads that they just weren't able to hang on to. And in the past with 49ers teams, when they've had a lead in the second half going into the fourth quarter, we've seen them kind of put their foot down, extend the lead, and really put an end to the game. But they really haven't done that. It's as if they've gotten like a 10-point lead, a 7-point lead, and then they kind of get complacent. The offense can't get anything going, and all of a sudden the opposing team, like in the Rams game and the Cardinals game, slowly creeps back into it, and then all of a sudden they kick a game-winning field goal, and you're like, wait, what just happened? They just lost the game. How in the world did that happen? So the Niners, so it's been really it's been really kind of confusing to see and kind of mind-boggling to say the least. The Niners and their inability to close games in this rough start for them. But if you're the if you've watched football and you've watched the Niners over the last couple of years, you know that the last thing you should do is count them out. And this is a team that has a big time tendency to get going and get hot at the right time as we reach full swing into the season here. But obviously a couple of confusing losses to the Niners. And then for the Seahawks, we talked about the Seahawks a lot before with the Giants game. Got off to that great start, tough loss against the Lions, kind of a bad, inexcusable loss to the Giants. So both of these teams kind of struggling a little bit coming into this matchup, which kind of makes this Thursday night matchup all the more interesting and all the more compelling. Should be a great game between two teams that should make the playoffs and two really talented rosters. And we'll see who comes out on top here.
Yeah, and the Niners obviously need a win in division, a huge game for them. Really, that comes down to tiebreakers, like you mentioned later in the season. Like these games really matter for this Niners team, and in that NFC West, they probably have like one of the easiest routes. I would say in terms of like division wise, like each and every division, yeah, they have some names in there. Of course, the West. But like I look at other divisions and say like, wow, gauntlet of a schedule based on how many teams are right there next to you. I don't think the Niners have a team that's like right there next to them. I think Seattle, when you look at it, is just kind of right by them. Maybe the Rams are right by them. But I look at this game in the end, 49.5-point total. I think they're expecting points in this one with how bad Seattle's defense has been. And I think when you look at that in the end, it should be interesting. Josh, who are you picking in this one? Team and then total.
Oh, man, this is a tough one. I'm going to go with the Niners to get a big – I know Seattle's a tough environment to play. I know they're the road team. And obviously Seattle, you got the 12th man, one of the toughest places to go to step in and play and play a big-time nationally televised road game. But I'm going to go with the 49ers to take this one on Thursday Night Football, get a big-time bounce-back win, improve their record to 3-3. And I think a lot of points are going to be scored in this game. I'm going to go with the over. I think that these teams are going to be throwing haymakers. Obviously, a couple of division rivals going to be amped up. Obviously, Jawan Jennings has been a big-time pleasant surprise in the absence of a couple of the 49ers' key weapons. But to me, for the 49ers, it's all about their top receivers and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and how is Brock Purdy going to get them going? Obviously, you're going to miss Christian McCaffrey, but can he get Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel going? And we haven't really seen that yet. So I think that finally their receiving duo of Ayuk and Deebo get going. I'm going to pick the Niners here in a really good, high-scoring, back-and-forth game, but I'm going with the Niners here. Get a big win on the road to try to get their season back on track here.
Definitely fair. I'm going to go with the Niners to win, Seahawks to cover. I think it's just going to be probably a field goal game or maybe a 1 or 2 point game. I think it's going to be a really close one. And it's going to come down to the wire. I am going to probably also take the over. I think the over in this one, just based on these defenses have struggled mightily, both of them. I think it could be a game where the Niners defense, steps up, but Seattle's defense is woeful. And they've been terrible this year. So looking at that, I'll take the over as well. But Josh, thanks for coming on again. We'll definitely do it next week. A lot of sports coming up, and best time of the year right now.
Right, best time of the year. We're rapidly approaching the sports equinox. We got hockey underway. Basketball starts up in a couple weeks. MLB playoffs in full swing. Obviously, you got football. So what a time in the year. We got a big weekend. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about next week too.
100%. And Sports Equinox coming up on October 28th. Watch out for that one on the calendar. But that'll do it for episode 8 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. From Josh Malat, I've been Zach Malamud. Thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Friday.